President Akufo-Addo has tasked the Energy Ministry to add at least 10% renewable energy to the country's power mix by 2030. It is part of efforts to gradually shift from over-reliance on hydro to generation of power. Deputy Minister of Energy William Ureku-Edu disclosed this at the commissioning of an 80-kilowatt solar project in Kumasi.
The solar panels, located on the roof of the Pozzolana cement factory at the Building and Rules Research Institute of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, produce 20 kilowatts of power. They reduce the research institution's consumption from the national grid by 15%. Daniel Asensu Jembibi is senior research scientist.
We are paying about 30,000 Ghana cedis every month to ECG, but now we are paying about 20,000.
Hydropower is the leading source of generation, contributing more than half of the country's capacity. Thermal generation comes with high cost of fuel to power plants with annual estimated expenditure on fuel at $950 million.
The vision of the president is to have 10% renewables in the total energy mix of the country. And when I talk about the renewable energy, I'm referring to solar, wind power, and biomass, waste to energy, all that constitute the renewable energy. And the target, based on the vision of the president, is to have 10% going forward to 2030, which we believe is totally achievable.
Maximilian Kwarting is Business Development Manager, Strategic Power Solutions, suppliers of solar energy to Bui Power. They produce 78.84 gigawatt hours to the country, and this feeds into the president's vision.
If government is to put 300 megawatt solar into the grid, there is going to be not less than $200 million annually savings on fuel.
Carter Solar System partnered the Building and Road Research Institute on the latest 60-kilowatt project. Dr. Eugene Atiemo is director at the BRRI.
We've been able to secure the relevant funding for supply and installation of an 80-kilowatt solar panel system. 20 kilowatts was installed last year, and 60 kilowatt power system have been added on this year.
Director at Carter, Dr. Kojuchu Mesiampo Fapia, says business-friendly policies will attract more investors into solar energy.
There are investors out there. Perhaps if policies could give them tax incentives and other incentives, we can get more people to invest.
Building and Rules Research Institute is collaborating with ECG to establish a net metering system to properly assess how much power it consumes. The excess can then be fed into the national electricity grid and taken back as when the institute needs it. Reporting for Joy News, Kwesi Deborah.
Now, government would have borrowed 72 billion cedis through bonds and treasury bills by December this year. It follows the release of the calendar covering government's borrowings from the capital market for the last quarter of the year. But where are these funds being directed to, and what could be the impact on the rising public debt? George Uafe tells us more.
The calendar showed that government will raise almost 15 billion cedis through treasury bills and bonds for the last quarter of this year. According to the data, 12.7 billion cedis will be used as rollover for maturing debts, whilst 2 billion cedis will be set aside as fresh cash for government operations. The amount of money being raised in the last quarter is the lowest compared to others in previous quarters. This will bring the total amount of money that government has borrowed from the capital market reaching 72 billion Ghana cedis. The calendar also showed that government is working to issue a 15-year bond in November this year to raise some 1 billion cedis and a 10-year bond to raise some 1.5 billion cedis. All these, according to government, are aimed at extending the time it takes to settle these debts. It is believed that this will obviously impact on the public debt, which has reached 139 billion Ghana cedis as of June this year. This is because out of this amount that is being raised, 9 billion cedis are fresh cash that would impact on the public debt.
Now, all challenges associated with the implementation of the paperless system at the port should be adequately addressed by the end of this year. That's the assurance from Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, Carlos Ahenkra. It follows a lingering challenges 1 month after the system was rolled out, even though stakeholders have generally hailed the potential of the initiative to significantly improve the cost and speed of doing business at the ports. Freight forwarders are, for instance, pressing for government to document and make available to stakeholders comprehensive guidelines for the system to yield the desired result. Mr. Ahenkra tells Joy Business measures are already being instituted to improve the situation.
You see, everything that starts, like this would expect some hiccups. We know that there's been some few turbulent times. People didn't have it very rosy. It became a challenge, for even people to get onto certain portals to access certain information. But lo and behold, as we moved on, all the rough edges have been smoothed. Today, as I speak to you, there are only little pouches of problems here and there that we are trying to deal with. Give it 2-3 months, it's going to be a near perfect system. What we are very comfortable with right now is the fact that people don't have to physically hold papers in the port to move around from table to table. Anybody or everybody working in the clearance chain in our ports who demands to see any documentation or who wants to see what processes has been gone through to get a certain particular cargo out of the port will need to go on the system somewhere and check.
Meanwhile, government is planning to establish an e-commerce portal for handicraft materials and other exportable arts. This is part of measures to ensure Ghana derives the full benefit of the free continental Africa trade market area. This came to light at the 77th Annual Exporters Forum organized by the Ghana National Promotion Authority.
Several challenges encountered by businesses in obtaining permits to establish themselves will soon be reduced as government embarks on reforms to attract more foreign direct investment. Speaking at the 77th Ghana Exporters Forum, Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, Carlos Ahenkra, stated that the decision to have a national business regulatory system is critical to the growth of the economy through FDIs.
Of course, including labor. So within the framework of this goal and in line with the President's vision for rapid industrialization to deliver jobs, the Ministry of Trade and Industry and other collaborating ministries, departments and agencies have developed a 3-year business regulation strategy which aims to modernize the quality of business legal and regulatory systems to promote faster growth, job creation, and economic prosperity. The strategy is designed to be systematic and permanent in its effects by changing how the government designs and implements business regulations in the future. Within the broader National Economic Forum agenda, the business regulation system or strategy aims to eliminate constraints to economic development, deepen and broaden current reform efforts in order to establish a national regulatory environment that sustainably reduces red tape and barriers and better promotes private sector activity and job creation. Distinguished exporters, we are optimistic that this strategy will enhance your operations for better performance in ensuing years.
The event was also used to unveil the newly rebranded Ghana Export Promotion Authority, GEPA, in line with the new export promotion strategy. Gipti Klenan is the Chief Executive of GEPA.
Ghana Export Promotion Authority is lost in the system, and the focus was not clearly defined. And so for us, one of the vision was to bring in and relaunching GEPA to get the public and then the entire nation get the awareness that export is the stronghold of one of the sectors that can promote and transform the economy. And by so doing, we needed to relaunch and then change the face of GEPA. So the whole rebranding is about making sure that the awareness of the existence of the institution, which has been mandated to promote, develop, and market exports.
The authority is hopeful of using its new brand to contribute to the target of a double-digit growth by government.
Government has been urged to come up with a tracking system on migration to help generate revenue. Speaking to Joy Business at the World Institute for Development Economics Research Conference on Migration and Mobility by the United Nations University World Institute for Development Economic Research, economist Professor Ernest Aite revealed such a system will also help boost intra-trade developments in the country.
How do we ensure that their benefits, the benefits of migration, far outweigh the costs of migration? It's not about whether migration is good or bad. That's not the issue. How do you ensure that the costs and benefits of migration are properly reflected and dealt with through policy?
Does it simply mean that as we speak now, there's no clear definition of how much we gain or lose out of migration or immigration?
You need first to understand the scope of migration. Nobody knows how many Ghanaians are traveling today through the desert to South Africa, to Libya. Nobody knows. Do you know that? Nobody knows that. So you've got to find a way of tracking that. You've got to find a way of measuring the impact of that. Okay. We know how many Ghanaians do travel by air to various places, how many of them stay behind, how many of them do return. We've got to find proper ways of recording this and documenting them. But I wouldn't make that commitment and say we are losing revenue. We've got to know it first. We've got to understand it first before we can make that determination. We do hope that there will be continuing interaction between us and the government, which will ensure that the findings and the continuing research will continue to be available to government policymakers.
On his part, Director of the United Nations University, Professor Finn Tarp, expressed confidence in moves to create an open market through the Continental Free Trade Agreement in Africa. He is therefore calling for a clear guideline on how this trade agreement can be made a success.
I believe that open movements of goods and also people tend, in general, to promote economic growth and development. Obviously, it has to be done in an orderly fashion, but all historical experience is based on an observation where you can see that if you have seen free movements of goods and people, then that tends to lead to stronger economic transformation, stronger processes of development, because people will seek out opportunities. And when people are seeking out opportunities, that underpins progress. The migration discussions at the global level, the purpose of this particular conference is to call attention to South-South migration, because in numbers of people who are actually migrating and moving from the South to the South is bigger than what we see from South to North. And that is the point we are trying to bring out here at this conference, and then trying to think about how one can integrate the South-South migration in a good way within development strategies and policies in the South, in developing countries.
Now, the smoke, referred to as patakari or fugu in the local parlance, used to be officially reserved for special occasions, but today they have become very trendy thanks to designers such as Aisha Audu Ali. Now, the startup is a creative director and founder of Shallywood, the smoke brand, which is fast gaining popularity. We now bring you a repeat of the Joy Business van, which headed to her boutique at Abavana Junction.
Aisha Audu Ali grew up in Bolgatanga in the Upper East region, where smokes are very common. The traditional attire made from handloom strips is very popular in the 3 northern regions of Ghana, worn during special occasions. Charliewood began for Aisha in 2015 after national service in Accra.
I was thinking of whether to go back to school or what was I going to do after national service. So I started selling the traditional smokes. I did my service at Roads and Highway. So some of the directors could ask me, Aisha, when you go to the north, I want you to get me a smoke. So I was like, okay, then I think that's a business to start. So I started bringing the smokes. I go to Bolga and make them, the traditional ones. And then I bring and sell it to some of the directors and then some of the people at the ministry.
If you've worn a smoke before, then you'd have realized it is quite heavy, and some people Aisha sold to would complain. That sparked the creativity in her.
I used to get people say, oh, I like these things, but they're too heavy. So I sat down one day and I was like, okay, so what can I do to make it lighter, easier to wear, and then easy to handle? So I started making skirts, and I made one for myself first. So when I wore it, I went to the ministry to sell. And then somebody asked me, like, oh, what's this made from? And I'm like, it's made from butter. Really? Can you make this skirt? I'm like, yes. So that's how it actually started. So I started making skirts. Then along the line, I decided to make stuffs for the men as well. So that's how it all started. Because I wanted to make it simpler, easy to handle, easy to wear, and make more people get attracted to what is actually coming from the north. Most of the time, I sit down and think about, that's when they say creative director. You have to sit down and think about what you want to do differently from what you have already done. So sometimes I just try and draw them myself. And then some of the women I work with, they also help me out with some of the designs. They draw them and show them to me. What do you think? Is it possible? Because our fabric is quite different from the African print. It's heavier to work with and very difficult to work with. So sometimes they draw the designs and they're like, Aisha, do you think the Batakari can do this? So it takes a process. We have to look at the design first, considering our machine, our fabric. So that's what goes into it.
Getting the smokes, though, is not an easy task.
I actually work with some of the artisans from Yerungu. It's a town in between Burkina and Bogatanga. So most of the artisans are there. I remember the first time I was going to see them myself. You know, when I got there, I was like, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. But I'm like, okay, if I don't do this anymore, how am I going to promote my stuffs? So getting there, it's a very rough road. And most of the people don't speak English. So if you can't speak Fafra or French, you can easily communicate with them. So I remember the first time, you know, from the road through Boga was smooth. I was excited. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to see Yorumongo for the first time. You know, but after Bongo, you know, the road got very rough. The roads were really bad. So one of the challenges is with the people I work with, even the road to where they work. It's actually one of the problems for even our business. Because sometimes you can do stuffs, but they're not on time because getting them from Yerungu to Bolga, before you bring it from Bolga to Accra, it will take a very long while.
But Aisha makes the trip frequently anyway. Her trendy smoke designs have caught on, earning Charliewood a place on the Ghana Startup Club 100.
I actually didn't know how, but you know, they opened up the platform for people to nominate businesses. So I didn't know whether somebody saw what I was doing and appreciated me and nominated me. I was just on my phone and then I saw that somebody had tagged me on Facebook. And then when I checked, it was the Premium Startup Awards, and I saw Charliewood there with other businesses I've been admiring all these years. So I was like, okay, so I've been nominated with all these people. It means, you know, like I'm really doing well, and I can do better as well.
But even more gratifying for Aisha is the fact that she's making the smoke attire more popular and creating jobs for many in the north.
The reason why I actually started Charliewood was to make people appreciate what was coming from the north. And I've always loved made in Ghana goods. I remember when I used to be in secondary school, my slippers were made from Bolga. You know, I make them into sandals and then take them to school. I was so different. So I think my love for made in Ghana goods, and then to just let people appreciate where I'm coming from and the things we have in the north. That's why I started Charliewood.
You can catch another edition of the Business Joy Business Van, of course, next Wednesday. But before we go, firms operating in the securities and capital market are set to have their minimum capital requirement increased. Joy Business understands a new capital will be announced soon, and operators may be given up to 1 year to meet the new levels. For some, this could be described as a complete capital review, which has already hit the banking and insurance sectors. Now, our man, George Wiafe, has been speaking to some players of the Securities and Exchange Commission and other investors, and has joined me right here in the studio to give some explanations. Now, George, why this certain development?
First, we spoke to the Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Reverend Nlogba Mitete, yesterday, and he disclosed this to us on why they have to up the capital level. He believes that development in the economy warrants this review because the economy is expanding, the risks are becoming very, very high, and we have to ensure that those who are playing in this space are well capitalized.
All right, so when you spoke to some of these players in the securities industry, what are they saying?
Well, they welcome it. They thought it was long overdue. But their concern now is that what would be the new level, since the regulator is not talking about quite a substantial increase in the capital. The same thing was leading up to when the Bank of Ghana was trying to review the capital levels, and people knew that it was going to go up, but what will be the actual level? And that is their concern right now. They think that it is long overdue, but the regulators to set levels that they can really meet it if you're looking at about a 1 year.
So are we expecting any measures such as...
Obviously, if he's talking about a substantial increase in the capital, there are some players who might not be able to do this. And unlike the banking sector where you had one set of banks operating in the industry, the capital market is a little bit different because you have custodians, you have fund managers, finance house, and all the rest. So depending on which area you are operating at, you might have a unique capital. But what is going to happen is that it will be a substantial increase, and it will be across all the players in the industry.
Now, George, is this not going to stifle the initiative of the capital markets to give out, extend credit to some players?
Unlike the banking sector, this is more of advisory service and also managing people's funds. So let's just say maybe a fund manager could be sitting on maybe 100 million Ghana cedis, and this fund manager is supposed to be investing these funds. Now, what if some of these investments go bad? Are they in a position to actually pay investors? And that is where the concern is. So if you are sitting on about 100 million funds and you have a capital requirement of about $20 million or 20 million Ghana cedis, obviously there will be a problem there if the fund should go bust. And that is why look in a situation where it should be capitalized more than the funds that you're sitting on.
Now, I don't really know what the level is currently, but are we expecting anything within the regime of the banks?
Unlike what I said, that unlike the banking sector where you have one sector or one player or one institution cutting across, these are different areas. And therefore, if it's substantial, you have to look at what fund managers are supposed to have as their minimum capital. You look at finance houses, what are they supposed to have as their minimum capital? You look at custodians, what are they supposed to have? But if it's substantial, then we could be looking at over 200% jump in the capital they're supposed to hold before they can do business in the country.
What does it mean for the private sector?
Well, it means that you'll be having investment houses, you'll be having finance houses, you'll be having custodians, you'll be having fund managers that are well capitalized. And if they should go down, I mean, indeed, there are funds there that you can fall on to actually help pay off all these investors and depositors who are dealing with these financial institutions.
And what's the deadline again, the timeline?
What we are picking up is that it'll be announced very soon, and that they might be given up to a year to meet this new level. So capital increase in the banking sector, capital increase in the financial and insurance sector, and then capital increase in the capital and securities market. So you have a complete bouquet of
the financial sector.
For the financial sector. Yeah.
Thank you very much, George.
Thank you so much, Wiafe.
All right, that was George Wiafe updating us about the decision by the Securities and Exchange Commission to increase the capital requirement. And on that note, we wrap up this afternoon's edition of The Marketplace. Many thanks for your time, and do join us again same time tomorrow for another interesting package. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji Wiafe. Good afternoon.